Pattern. Multiple false. Replacement. Title. The alien princess pointed to the youngest human soldier and said, "He will be mine." None. The day had come when everything would change. The princess had endured council debates, whispers from nobles, and even attempts to manipulate her choice. The young soldier had faced doubt, danger, and disbelief from both humans and aliens. Yet now, standing in the palace's grand hall, surrounded by representatives from both worlds, it was clear that their courage and persistence had brought them to this moment. The hall was filled with an expectant hush. Aliens in flowing robes and humans in decorated uniforms lined the sides, their eyes full of curiosity and tension. Many had argued that this union was impossible, that tradition, protocol, and pride would prevent it. Yet here they were, and the princess and the soldier stood together at the center, their hands almost touching. The air felt thick with anticipation, and even the music seemed to pause, waiting for what was about to happen. The princess took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. She saw doubt, curiosity, and even disbelief in the faces around her, but she remained calm. This was her choice, and she would not be swayed. Turning to the soldier, she offered a faint smile. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked softly. He nodded, feeling the weight of their journey press on him. "Yes," he replied quietly. "It means we stand together, no matter what anyone else says." Her eyes glimmered with approval, and in that moment the tension in the hall seemed to ease just slightly. The ceremony began. It was not just a union between two individuals, but a symbol of unity between humans and aliens. Both worlds watched carefully, noting the courage it took for them to stand there against expectations. Elders who had once opposed the match whispered to each other, wondering if perhaps the princess had seen something they had not. And as the ritual progressed, it became clear that this was more than politics. It was a declaration of understanding, respect, and hope. The young soldier could hardly believe it. Just months ago, he had been an unnoticed boy among experienced leaders. Now he was recognized as someone important, not because of rank or power, but because of his character. The princess had seen that in him when no one else had, and he finally began to see it in himself. Each step forward during the ceremony felt like a step into a new life, a life he had not imagined, but one he was ready to embrace. After the formalities, they walked together through the palace gardens. The glowing flowers and gentle lights created a peaceful atmosphere, contrasting with the tension that had dominated the halls for weeks. For the first time, the soldier felt a sense of calm. They had passed the trials, faced the doubts, and now their connection was visible to all. The princess squeezed his hand gently. "We have done more than just stand together," she said. "We have shown both our people that unity is possible, even when it seems impossible." Word of their courage and bond spread quickly. Humans and aliens alike began to rethink their assumptions. Those who had opposed the union started to see the wisdom in it. If a young soldier and a princess could stand together despite challenges, perhaps there was hope for cooperation between their worlds. Slowly, hearts began to open, and the possibility of a new era of understanding emerged. The soldier, still adjusting to his new role, realized how much he had grown. He had learned that bravery was not only about facing danger, but also about standing for what was right. Loyalty was not blind obedience, but the courage to protect and care for those who could not protect themselves. And love, he discovered, was not a weakness, but a strength that could inspire change in even the most rigid systems. For the princess, the journey had also been transformative. She had learned that her voice could challenge centuries of tradition, that her choices could shape the future of her empire, and that true leadership was rooted in courage, compassion, and understanding. By choosing the young soldier, she had not only followed her heart, but also shown her people the power of empathy and trust in an engine together. They began to plan a future that would honor both their worlds. They met with leaders from each side, discussing ways to strengthen alliances, encourage cooperation, and foster peace. Their bond became a symbol, not of rebellion, but of hope. They had proven that even in a galaxy filled with rules, hierarchy, and expectations, individuals could make choices that brought people together rather than driving them apart. Now life in the palace gradually returned to normal, but the world outside had changed. Stories of the young soldier and the princess circulated across both empires, inspiring others to look beyond tradition and see the value in courage, kindness, and honesty. They were no longer just a princess and a soldier. They had become a bridge between two civilizations, living proof that trust and understanding could triumph over fear and suspicion. In quiet moments, they reflected on how far they had come. The soldier often thought back to the day she had pointed at him, in the great hall, declaring that he would be hers. At the time it had seemed impossible, even frightening. But that moment had set everything in motion. It had brought them together, challenged their worlds, and created a future neither of them could have imagined. As the sun set over the palace, casting golden light over the gardens, they stood side by side, looking toward the horizon. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and full of possibilities. They knew challenges would come, as they always did, but they also knew they could face them together. Their bond had been tested, their loyalty proven, and their courage unwavering. Nothing could take that away. And so, the alien princess and the youngest human soldier stepped into the next chapter of their lives, not just as partners, but as symbols of a future redefined. Two worlds had learned that connection, trust, and love could change the course of history, and their story would be remembered for generations as proof that courage and choice could create unity in the most unexpected places. None. Pattern: multiple false, replacement. Title: The Alien Princess. Pointed to the youngest human soldier and said, "He will be mine." The princess's words did not fade quickly. They spread like a fire through both human and alien circles. By the next day, every corridor of the palace was filled with whispers. Servants repeated the scene in hushed voices, soldiers argued in secret corners, and nobles frowned as they shared their disapproval. The choice of the princess had shaken everyone. To some it was bold, to others it was reckless, and to many it was unthinkable. Among the alien court, tradition was treated as sacred. For generations, royal family members were expected to choose their partners from noble bloodlines or from alliances that would strengthen the empire. Every marriage was political. Every vow was strategic. The princess's declaration broke that chain. She had not chosen a noble, a leader, or even a warrior of great renown. She had chosen a human, and not just any human, a boy so young that even his own people hardly noticed him. And the elders of the alien council gathered that morning. Their robes shimmered with symbols of power, their faces tight with concern. They argued endlessly. Some said the princess was testing her people, trying to see how far she could bend the rules. Others believed she was mocking the humans, playing a dangerous game that could spark insult. But a few feared something else, that she truly meant it, and that she would not be moved by reason. If she binds herself to him, one elder warned, it will not only weaken our traditions but also blur the line between us and them. Ainin and the human delegation was no less troubled. The commanders and ambassadors locked themselves in discussion. They worried the princess's words were a trap, meant to humiliate them or to create division. The youngest soldier had suddenly become the center of attention, and this worried the humans greatly. He was not trained for diplomacy, nor was he prepared to carry the weight of such an unexpected burden. "We must request she withdraw her words," one ambassador insisted. "This cannot stand. Our people will see it as weakness." Another general added, "The boy himself cannot be allowed to act without orders. He is a soldier, nothing more." Stendin. While the leaders clashed in arguments, the young soldier himself sat quietly in his quarters. His comrades circled around, some teasing, others warning him to be careful. He hardly heard their voices. His mind was clouded with the memory of her gaze, her voice, and the certainty in her words. He still could not understand it. He was nobody special, so why had she chosen him? The weight of that question pressed on him like a mountain. Later, that day, he was summoned by his commander. The stern officer looked at him with sharp eyes. "You will say nothing unless spoken to," the commander instructed. "You will not step out of line, you will not engage her, and you will not let your emotions show. This is politics, not a game. Do you understand?" The soldier nodded quickly, though inside he felt a storm raging. He wanted to protest, to say he had not asked for any of this, but his voice failed him. He was a soldier, and soldiers obeyed. Meanwhile, the princess remained calm in the face of growing unrest. She walked through the palace halls with quiet confidence, as though nothing unusual had happened. Courtiers tried to persuade her to reconsider. Advisors warned her of consequences. Yet when asked, she only smiled faintly and repeated the same words. "He is the one I choose." Her calmness frustrated her critics, but it also revealed her strength. She was not a child playing at defiance. She was certain, though no one else understood why. And in the great council chamber, the debates grew louder. Human ambassadors urged for clarity. Alien elders demanded the princess explain herself. Finally, in front of both sides, she was asked to speak. The chamber fell silent as she rose from her seat. Her voice carried softly, but with authority. "I am the princess of this empire. I have seen warriors, nobles, and rulers all my life, but strength is not always found where tradition tells us to look. My choice is mine, and I stand by it." Her words caused a stir. Some saw arrogance, others saw courage, but most of all they saw determination. It became clear she would not take her words back. The human leaders exchanged worried glances, while alien elders whispered furiously. The youngest soldier sat at the edge of the chamber, his head bowed, wishing he could vanish. He felt like a stone thrown into a vast ocean, creating waves far bigger than himself. And in that night, tension filled the palace like a storm ready to break. The soldier lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts would not rest. He wondered what his family would think if they heard this story. He wondered what his fellow soldiers whispered behind his back. But above all, he wondered why the princess had chosen him. Did she see something in him that he himself could not see? Or was this some test of her power, a way to challenge the old traditions of her people? Each possibility made his chest tighten. In the days that followed, the resistance grew stronger. Alien nobles openly mocked the idea of a human being considered worthy of their princess. Some called it dangerous, others called it laughable. Human commanders, too, worried about the soldier being used as a tool. They spoke of recalling him, of sending him away from the palace to end the rumors, but the princess would not allow it. When whispers reached her that the humans planned to remove him, she sent a message to the council. "If he is sent away, then so am I." This shocked everyone. Her loyalty to her choice was unshakable. For the first time, even her critics began to hesitate. Was it truly only defiance? Or had she seen something no one else could see? Her certainty began to plant seeds of doubt in the hearts of her people. Perhaps tradition was not as unbreakable as they had always believed. The soldier, however, felt only confusion. Each time he saw her, he bowed nervously, avoiding her gaze. He did not know how to speak to a princess, nor how to carry the attention she had placed on him, yet she seemed unbothered by his silence. Whenever their paths crossed, her expression remained calm, as though she were simply waiting for him to find his voice. Both worlds now held their breath. The princess had made her choice, and both sides resisted it with all their strength. But her determination refused to bend, and her eyes never left the soldier she had chosen. Tradition itself was trembling, and the galaxy seemed to know that nothing would remain the same. None. Pattern. Multiple false. Replacement. Title. The Alien Princess. Pointed to the youngest human soldier and said, "He will be mine." Days turned into weeks, and the storm caused by the princess's choice still had not passed. Whispers continued in the halls and arguments rose in both councils, but something else was beginning to happen too. Slowly, carefully, the princess and the young soldier began to meet, not as ruler and guard, but as two people curious about one another. At first, their meetings were small and simple. She would ask him questions while walking through the palace gardens, questions that startled him because no one of her rank had ever asked such things. "Where are you from?" she asked one evening, her eyes watching the stars above. He shifted nervously before answering. "A farming colony, far from the capital." She tilted her head as though the idea of someone growing up among fields instead of palaces was something new and fascinating. "Tell me about it," she said softly. And for the first time, the soldier found himself speaking, not as a guard, giving reports, but as a young man sharing his memories. And he spoke of his childhood, of long days under the sun, of the laughter of his siblings, of the way he had always felt small in a big universe. He confessed he had joined the military, not out of ambition, but out of a need to find purpose, to prove to himself that he was more than just another boy from a forgotten settlement. She listened closely, her face calm but her eyes alive with interest. No one had ever asked him these things before, and no one had ever listened as she did, without judgment or interruption. In return, the princess began to share pieces of her own life. She spoke of how heavy the crown felt even though she had never worn it. She told him of the endless lessons on politics, the constant reminders of duty, and the pressure to be perfect at all times. "They expect me to follow their path," she admitted one night, "but I want to find my own." Her words carried a sadness he had not expected. To the galaxy, she was a figure of power and grace. But behind the crown, she was also a young woman who longed for freedom. And the soldier began to see her differently. She was not just the princess who had pointed at him and claimed him in front of everyone. She was someone who carried her own struggles, someone who understood what it meant to feel trapped by expectations. And she, in turn, began to see him, not as a symbol, not as a soldier, but as a person, honest, humble, and unshaped by the politics of the court. And their bond grew slowly, like a seed finding sunlight. Sometimes they spoke for hours. Other times they sat in silence, watching the stars from the palace balconies. The soldier often felt nervous, unsure if he was saying the right things, but the princess seemed content simply to be near him. She did not demand grand words or gestures. She only asked for honesty. That honesty became the bridge between them. Of course, not everyone was pleased. The alien nobles watched their meetings with suspicion, their whispers turning sharper with each passing day. Some accused the princess of losing focus, of betraying her people's pride. Others accused the soldier of using her kindness for his own gain. Even among the humans, rumors spread that he was forgetting his duty, that he was allowing himself to be manipulated. Yet, no matter what others said, both of them continued to meet. Their connection was too real to be broken by whispers. 1. Evening, when the palace gardens were lit by glowing flowers, the princess asked him a question that made his heart race. "Do you fear me?" she said. He hesitated, unsure how to answer. Finally, he shook his head. "I don't fear you. I respect you. You carry more than anyone I've ever met, but you still choose to walk your own way. That takes courage." She studied him for a long time, and then, for the first time, she smiled. Not the polite smile of a ruler, but the warm smile of a person finding comfort in another's words. Their bond deepened. The soldier began to feel changes within himself. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, a boy with nothing remarkable to offer. But in her presence, he began to see his own worth. She valued his honesty, his humility, and his loyalty. Those were not traits of weakness, but of quiet strength. And through her eyes he began to believe that maybe he was more than he had ever thought. And the princess, too, began to change. For so long, she had carried the weight of tradition and the expectations of her people. But with the soldier, she could speak freely, laugh without restraint, and admit her doubts. He gave her a space where she could simply be herself, not the heir to a throne, but a person who wanted to live, to feel, to choose. It was not long before their connection began to draw the attention of others in a different way. Some began to see that perhaps the princess's choice had not been madness but something deeper. The way she looked at him was not mockery, and the way he stood by her was not weakness. There was a quiet strength in their bond, a balance that neither tradition nor politics had ever created. One evening, as the stars shone brighter than usual, the soldier confessed something he had carried inside for weeks. "When you pointed at me, I felt small. I thought you had made a mistake. But now I think maybe you saw something I couldn't see in myself." The princess looked at him, her expression soft. "I saw someone honest in a world full of masks," she said. "I saw someone unshaped by ambition. Someone who could stand beside me not because of power, but because of truth." Her words struck him deeply, and for the first time he began to accept that maybe her choice was not an accident after all. But even as their bond grew, challenges remained. The elders of the alien council still opposed her, and the human commanders still doubted him. Rumors of betrayal and danger hung in the air. Yet in the quiet moments they shared, none of that mattered. For in those moments, they were not princess and soldier, alien and human. They were simply two people who had found in each other what they could not find anywhere else. And so, step by step, their bond became something neither tradition nor politics could easily break. It was not born of power, but of understanding, not of duty, but of choice. And though the galaxy around them still resisted, their hearts had already begun to walk a path of their own. And in pattern, multiple, false, replacement. Title: The Alien Princess pointed to the youngest human soldier and said, "He will be mine." No. The bond between the princess and the youngest soldier was no longer a secret. By now, the palace corridors were alive with rumors that reached even the farthest corners of both empires. Some whispered with curiosity, others with disapproval, and some with outright anger. Their closeness was not something either world was ready to accept. What had started as a bold declaration by the princess had now become a question of loyalty, honor, and power. The soldier began to feel the pressure more than ever. Each day he noticed the stares of alien nobles when he walked through the palace. Their eyes were sharp, filled with doubt and quiet scorn. Some even muttered insults when they thought he could not hear. Among his own people, the humans he had trained under, there was little comfort. Many of them were suspicious. "She's using you," one captain warned him. "Don't be blinded. Royals always play games." Another whispered harshly, "Remember your duty. You are a soldier, not a lover. Don't forget who you serve." The young soldier listened but did not respond. Their words filled him with doubt, yet deep inside, he could not deny the truth of his heart. The princess's kindness was real, and the bond they had built was not a trick. The tests of loyalty came in many forms. One evening, while standing guard in a quiet hallway, an alien noble approached him. The noble's eyes gleamed with arrogance. "You think you belong beside her?" he sneered. "You are a child among giants. Go back to your world before you shame yourself further." The soldier clenched his fists, but said nothing. He had learned to endure the mockery, even when it burned inside him. Another time, a human ambassador cornered him after a council session. "Do you realize what danger you're creating for us?" the ambassador demanded. "If she binds herself to you, it could divide our people. You will not be a hero. You will be a curse." The soldier lowered his head, torn between duty and the quiet truth he felt whenever he was with the princess. And the princess, too, faced her own trials. The alien elders grew louder in their opposition. They argued that her actions threatened the balance of power. Some went so far as to say she was unfit to rule if she allowed her heart to guide her. A leader must think of her empire, not of herself, they declared. Yet the princess stood firm. "I do think of my people," she answered in the council chamber. "But strength does not come from cold traditions alone. It comes from choices that bring truth and unity." Her words shocked many, but they also revealed the depth of her resolve. She would not be moved. The pressure grew heavier when enemies from outside the palace took notice. Rival factions who hated the idea of peace saw an opportunity in the growing scandal. Rumors of plots spread. Some whispered that assassins had been sent to watch the soldier, waiting for a chance to strike. Others claimed that certain nobles might even betray the princess to prevent her from breaking tradition. The palace, once a place of safety, now felt like a web of hidden dangers. And on one night, the soldier's loyalty was tested more than ever. While walking through the palace grounds, he sensed something wrong. A shadow moving where it should not. Instinct told him to follow. In the quiet darkness, he discovered a figure armed with a hidden blade, waiting near the princess's chambers. Without hesitation, the soldier lunged forward, tackling the intruder before harm could be done. They struggled fiercely, the clash echoing against the stone walls. Though he was smaller and less experienced, the soldier's determination burned, stronger than his fear. At last he overpowered the attacker, holding him until the guards arrived. When the princess learned what had happened, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "You risked your life," she said, her voice soft but steady. The soldier shook his head. "It's my duty," he replied. But deep inside, he knew it was more than duty. It was loyalty not only to her as a princess, but to her as the person he had come to know and care for. And word of his bravery spread quickly. Some still mocked him, but others began to see him differently. He was no longer just the boy she had pointed at in a crowded hall. He was the one who had stood between her and danger. Even the alien council, though reluctant, began to recognize that his presence beside her was not weakness. The soldier himself, however, did not feel like a hero. He still carried doubts, still wondered if he was worthy of her trust. But every time she looked at him with calm, steady eyes, he felt the strength to keep going. The trials did not end there. Human commanders summoned him to a private meeting. Their faces were hard, their voices sharp. "You are forgetting who you serve," they accused. "Your loyalty belongs to humanity, not to her." The soldier stood in silence, his hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to shout that he had not betrayed anyone, that his heart could hold loyalty to both duty and to her, but words failed him. In the end, he simply bowed his head and endured their anger. And the princess faced a similar confrontation. The elders demanded that she choose. "Will you obey the traditions of your people?" they asked, "or will you defy us for him?" The chamber fell silent, waiting for her response. She looked at them calmly and said, "I choose truth. I choose him." Gasps filled the room, and outrage followed, but her words could not be taken back. She had drawn a line, and she would not cross it. And together they endured insult, suspicion, and danger. Each trial only deepened their bond. The soldier learned that loyalty was not blind obedience, but the courage to stand for what he believed was right. The princess learned that love was not weakness, but strength. Strength to face her people, her traditions, and even her enemies. The galaxy still doubted them, and threats still lingered in the shadows. But through it all, they walked side by side, proving to themselves and to others that their connection was not a fleeting desire. It was real, it was strong, and it was unshakable no matter how many trials tested it. Pattern: multiple. False replacement. Title: The Alien Princess. Pointed to the youngest human soldier and said, "He will be mine." The galaxy had always been full of silence between humans and alien empires. For years they had watched each other with suspicion, rarely coming close except on battlefields. But now there was a fragile moment of peace. Both sides had agreed to hold a grand ceremony where leaders would meet not as enemies but as possible allies. The human side sent ambassadors, generals, and decorated soldiers. They wanted to show strength, but also respect. Among those chosen, to guard the human delegation was the youngest soldier of the group. He was hardly noticed when the names were read. He was new, inexperienced, and still carried the uncertainty of a boy who had not yet seen the horrors of war. No one expected him to play any role in the events that were about to unfold. He stood in his armor at the edge of the great hall. The ceilings rose so high they seemed to touch the stars. Strange banners of the alien empire hung in waves of shimmering colors alive with light. Musicians played unfamiliar instruments that echoed through the chamber. Humans walked stiffly, trying not to appear small before the towering aliens. The young soldier stood quietly, his hands behind his back, his heart beating too fast for comfort. He thought of his training, the endless drills, and how he had dreamed of being a part of something important. But this? He was only here because every unit had to send someone. He believed his presence meant nothing. When the doors at the far end of the hall opened, the atmosphere changed. The alien royal family entered. The crowd turned and silence replaced the music. At the center of the group was the princess. She was taller than any human, yet graceful, her movements flowing like water. Her eyes glowed softly, and her presence filled the hall with a quiet authority. The soldiers near the young recruit straightened their backs, sensing the weight of the moment. The princess was not only the heir to her empire but also the face of the fragile peace. Every word, every gesture of hers mattered. Her gaze moved slowly across the hall, studying each human. The generals with their medals, the ambassadors with their carefully chosen words, the captains in shining uniforms. All of them carried themselves with pride, expecting to be noticed. The young soldier lowered his eyes, afraid she might look his way. He was nobody, and he did not want to stand out. But then, against all his hopes, he felt her attention settle on him. His chest tightened, and he froze, unsure whether he should bow or remain still. The hall grew quiet as her steps slowed. And then it happened. The princess raised her hand and, without hesitation, pointed directly at him. Her voice was calm but clear, echoing through the chamber. "He will be mine." For a moment, no one moved. The human commanders stared in disbelief. The alien nobles whispered to each other in shock. The young soldier's ears rang and his legs felt weak. He wondered if he had misheard. Surely she meant someone else. Surely this was a mistake. But her gaze remained steady on him, her expression unreadable but certain. She had chosen him. Out of all the warriors, leaders, and diplomats gathered in the hall, she had chosen the youngest, most inexperienced human soldier. The murmurs spread like wildfire. Some humans exchanged angry looks, suspecting a trap. Why? Would the princess point to one of their lowest-ranking soldiers? Was this an insult, or was it some kind of political game? The alien council members looked equally unsettled. The princess's words carried power, and her choice could not be taken lightly, yet this was unheard of. No member of the royal family had ever spoken so boldly about a foreigner, let alone in front of both nations. Now the soldier's mind spun. He wanted to disappear, to step back into the shadows and let someone else take his place. His throat was dry, and his hands trembled inside his gloves. He had never been the center of attention in his life. He had grown up in a small settlement far from the capital, far from the eyes of rulers. His dream had been simple: to serve, to protect, to prove himself worthy. But now the eyes of two worlds were on him, and he could not understand why. Commander of the human delegation stepped forward quickly, trying to control the situation. He bowed slightly to the princess and spoke carefully, his voice carrying the tension in the air. "Your Highness, perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. This soldier is young, untested. Surely one of our officers would be more suited to..." Whatever purpose you have in mind. And the princess did not look away. Her voice was calm but firm. No misunderstanding. I choose him. And the human commander pressed his lips together, uncertain how to respond. On the alien side, several advisors whispered urgently, trying to persuade her otherwise. But she lifted her hand slightly, silencing them all. Her decision was final. The hall remained frozen, caught between disbelief and fear. The soldier stood rooted to the floor. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but words would not come. His mind replayed the sound of her voice, those 4 words echoing inside him. He will be mine. What did she mean? What did she see in him? He felt like a child again, lost and unprepared. Yet there was no escape. His life had just changed, and there was no turning back. The ceremony continued, but the air was heavy. Every glance, every whisper returned to the princess's choice. Humans shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to feel proud or insulted. Aliens murmured about prophecy, destiny, or defiance. The soldier felt none of it mattered. All he knew was that something impossible had just happened to him. He had been pointed out in a hall full of the greatest leaders of 2 civilizations, and chosen by someone who should never have noticed him. Canonese. The gathering came to an end. The soldier followed his unit back to their quarters. His comrades stared at him with a mix of envy, suspicion, and disbelief. Some muttered jokes under their breath while others looked at him with silent warning. But he said nothing. His thoughts were too heavy. In the quiet of his mind, he replayed the princess's words again and again. Each time they sounded less like a mistake and more like a promise. And though he did not yet understand what lay ahead, he felt the weight of destiny pressing on his shoulders. That night, he could not sleep. The stars outside the palace windows seemed closer than ever, as though they too were watching him. He asked himself over and over, why me? Was it chance? Was it fate? Or had she seen something in him that even he could not see? Whatever the answer, one truth became clear. His life would never be the same again. The moment the princess pointed at him, the youngest human soldier, the course of his future, and perhaps the future of 2 worlds, had changed forever.